Today we've got Martin from Three Quires Vineyard. Three Quires Vineyard produce the Cotswold Hills wine, which the grapes are from our own vineyard at the university. So we have a good relationship with Three Quires, and we do a lot with them. So I thought it was a fantastic opportunity to get them in. Wine is an interesting subject because it's a growing industry in the UK and it has a fantastic future. So over to Martin.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Hopefully you can all hear me. If I dip in and out, then I apologise. If you suddenly can't hear me at all, then let me know and I'll stand closer to the microphone. I think the idea is I'll tell you a little bit about Three Quires and about the industry and where I think it's going. And then I think it's probably far more interesting if we open it up, and if you want me to talk about something or have some points, then we'll just open it up and people can ask questions and I'll keep talking. So just a little bit of background for you. Three Quires planted the first vineyards. It was actually my father-in-law that planted the first vines in 1973. It was at a time when a little bit of farm diversification was becoming interesting to farmers. The owner of the farm at the time, it was an apple and blackcurrant farm. The owner was a gentleman called Alan McKechnie, who also had a wine shop in the local town of Ledbury. And so my father-in-law and he decided that it would be good fun to plant up 1/2 acre of vines. So they did that, and it takes 3 years to get a crop, your first crop. And I can't see all your pictures, but some of you might be old enough to remember 1976 as being one of the hottest summers on record. And in true British fashion, they thought, wow, this is great. This is here to come. This is here to stay. So let's plant up some more. So that's how Three Quires sort of started, really. And sometimes I try and imagine what might have happened if 1976 had been a little bit like last year, and we probably wouldn't have had the same enthusiasm to plant up more, and it might have been a completely different story. But at the time, there were a few other vineyards around, but not that many, and it was a very, very difficult thing to market. Three Quires have always had a presence in the tourism department ever since we started planting the first vines. We were open to the public. They used to drive down the lane and knock on the door and buy a few bottles of wine. And really, right from the start, we sold about 25% of our production directly to the public. So and we've been through various phases as the industry has developed and as tourism has gathered traction as well. We've moved with that, and we still sell about 25 to 30% of our production directly to the public. We'll talk a little bit later about how the routes to market have changed a little bit over the last few years, but fundamentally it's a key part of our business is the tourism side, but also very, very important to get the wine out into the trade and get the name of Three Quires known to everybody. So the trade sales are also fairly critical to us, and we've been very lucky in having good, supportive customers that we've worked with for a long time, whether that's the Wine Society, Waitrose, and quite a few others as well. But it's a much easier product to sell now than it was in the 80s, for example. But it didn't stop us trying to expand, and we very quickly grew up to 25 acres. It was at a time when there were new varieties coming on stream that were developed in Germany, especially for cool climate winemaking. We realized that Germany were the net importers of wine, and so they had a very, very keen interest in pushing the boundaries of grape growing. So these new varieties were coming out that were more easy to grow. They were easy to grow, not quite organically, but with less inputs into the vineyard, and gave a more regular yield. And those were varieties called Sauvignon Blanc, Phoenix, Orion, Regent and Rondo. So that then became our problem, in that these varieties were not particularly well known, not particularly fashionable. And at a time when the industry was developing, everybody knew Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, but they hadn't a clue about the varieties that we were growing. So the marketing side had to be quite astute, and we had to find ways of getting people a little bit more interested in English wine. So rather than calling the wines after the varieties, we developed names for the wines. So Three Quires, for example, have a range of wines called Coleridge Hill, Willow Brook. May Hill is probably one of our biggest sellers because of the name, because everybody can look out from the vineyard and see May Hill in the distance. So we've gone away from trying to tell people too much about the varieties we grow, but actually talk more about the style and the journey of English wine. I would say that in the 90s, it was very, very difficult. The marketplace was very much either directly from the vineyard or through the supermarket sector. So we were stocked in Waitrose, was one of the first ones we were in, but also Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Morrison's, Safeways. So we covered quite a wide range of supermarket shelves. The problem in those days was that people were very confused between English and British, and the English wines would get put on the bottom shelf next to British wines, and there's a big difference. And it's a big problem with an awful lot of products, not just wine, but the word British has been a little bit compromised because it doesn't mean what it should mean. So we have the English and Welsh wine industry, not the British wine industry, because British wine can be made from foreign concentrate that's brought over to the country and fermented in this country. So it's very, very cheap wine, sits on the bottom shelf, the sort of thing students would take to a party and leave on the table and drink at the end of the night if there's nothing else left. Things like Concord, Rougemont Castle, famous names for the student drinker in the 80s and 90s. Then something really fundamental started to happen that really helped to launch English wine a bit more. We started to win a few awards for producing sparkling wines, and all of a sudden people started to perk up and look at the potential for producing wines that could rival the quality of champagne. And that happened at around about the same time as the public started to become far more interested in local produce in provenance. In the 80s and early 90s, I think that there was almost an anti-feeling towards British produce. Selling an English apple was very, very difficult because French Golden Delicious would hit the shelves looking perfect before the apples ripened in this country. And so actually getting people to drink English wine was quite a challenge, because after all, wine comes from France. But then as we got into the late 90s and into the early 2000s, we started to see farmers markets getting a lot of traction. And all of a sudden, people realized that there was some really good produce on our doorsteps. And that's really followed through over the last 15 to 20 years. Increased awareness of provenance. We had the horse meat scandal, which probably focused people even more. And I think even now, when we look at our situation now with the terrible year or two we've had, we're looking more locally, aren't we? We're looking at what we've got around the corner and supporting local business and buying local products, not being quite so worried about saving 5 or 10p here and there. We want quality from trusted sources. So now we're starting to see the importance of conveying the right methods of production, the right way of actually growing and producing our product. Big word in the industry now is sustainability. So we've been through organics and biodynamics, which are still very important parts of our industry. But actually, you can be an organic farmer and not be particularly sustainable. So, and I think sustainability is a word that's really captured the public. I think they understand. They all have this slightly their own meaning, their own interpretation of it, but it's a word they understand far more than organic, probably. And I think that's linked into this whole crusade about protecting our planet and doing everything the right way. And so we've put a lot of importance on that in the last couple of years. We're one of the first vineyards to gain accreditation for the UK, the Wine GB sustainability standard, which, to be honest, is not very hard to do at the moment, but it's actually a journey. So we're there, we're registered, we're carbon negative in the vineyard, and we've got work to do in the winery, but we've got something on our label now, which will be coming on new future vintages, which will show that we're actually trying to grow things in the right way and do the right things for the sustainability of the industry and the planet. So they're quite exciting things. It's nice to have something new to talk to customers about. And our customer base is a very loyal customer base. We've got a good mail order list, people that buy our wines again and again. Once you get a customer, you don't want to let them go. So we do communicate with them quite a lot. Last year, 2/3 of the wine we sold direct from the vineyard would have been sold mail order. Saw a huge increase in mail order business last year. And the big debate is whether that's here to stay, or when we return to normal, will we all go back to the old ways? And I think there's probably a little bit of middle ground there. I think that mail order will still remain quite an important part of the business. But the key for us is to get people to come to the vineyard. As we've developed with our with the tourism's changed enormously over the years as well. So when we first started, we used to have people turning up in their cars and buying a bottle of wine and going home again. Then we saw people coming out in coaches for parties and outings, probus clubs, women's institutes, all of these sort of groups and clubs would come out, fill a coach up and come out, and we'd give them a ploughman's supper and a glass of wine, and they'd all buy a bottle of wine and go home. That then faded as people started to get more independent. They decided that they didn't want to go on coaches, so coaches started to come out only half full, which made it uneconomic for them. So coach loads of people disappeared, but more and more people turned up independently in their cars. So we then had to find ways to entertain those people at the time that they arrived. So we developed the restaurant so that people could sit and eat when they arrived. We had tastings on, and we did tours 2 or 3 times a day. And that's really carried on now, and that's how we're developing the business. And then when COVID struck this time last year, we were already struggling to find a way forward in our tourism, because we were finding we're quite rural here, and I don't think it's just us. I think it's a common problem across the hospitality industry, in that lunchtime trade is far more difficult than it used to be. The whole idea of having time for lunch when you're at work is disappearing. We actually grab a bite to eat whilst we're working, or just take 10 minutes, 15 minutes. The idea of a social business lunch is not really the done thing now. And certainly drinking at lunchtime is far less acceptable than it used to be 10 or 20 years ago. So the lunchtime trade has become very difficult. And we took the decision, we were just mulling it over when COVID took place. We were just thinking of actually closing the restaurant at lunchtimes from Monday to Thursday, and only opening up over the weekends. And that was sort of forced upon us because of COVID. But by doing that, we were able to reduce our overheads enormously. we had to have 2 chefs, and all of a sudden we only needed 1 chef, and chefs don't come cheap. And then, so we decided now we couldn't have people coming in off the road quite the same way, but we were still able to offer hotel rooms and a limited service. So we suddenly found our hotel rooms, which we've got 8 hotel rooms and 3 lodges at the moment. So 22 people a night. We've been fully booked right the way through from when lockdown was ended last July, right through until we were locked down again in November. Every night we had 22 people staying, and we suddenly realized that actually they were having a far better experience and going away buying a lot more wine than if we were just getting loads and loads of people in off the road and almost processing them. So our new business model is to actually not go too far away from what we ended up doing last year, because it's been really, really successful. People have a good experience. They go away thinking very highly of Three Quires. They're buying wine. They're not afraid to buy wines at a higher price. And the whole model seems to work really, really well. On the trade side, you might think that that's been an absolute disaster, because all of the hotels and restaurants have been mostly closed. On trade has struggled. So yes, we've done a lot less through our normal trading channels, with the exception of our main customer, which is the Wine Society, who are a mail order company, who've gone absolutely berserk this year and moving more wine than ever. So we're able to work with them and put more wine through direct to consumer. And we've got a really good relationship with them. They have their own mail order list, obviously. And but a lot of their members will come to us directly for their wine as well, and it all sort of works really, really well. So that's really how we've arrived at where we are now. We also do, another side of our business is contract winemaking. So David mentioned that we were making wine for the Agricultural University, and have been for a few years now. And that's quite an important part of the work that goes on in the winery. We produce about 200,000 bottles of our own wine, and we produce another 200,000 for other vineyards that bring their grapes to us for us to do the winemaking for them. I've always said that that our industry is split very much into 3 sections. You've got those that do the growing, you've got those that do the selling, and in between you've got those that do the making. And generally speaking, people are very, very good at one of those things. They become experts in that field. They get by with the second, and they're absolutely hopeless at the third. And therefore, they're better off leaving it for somebody else to do. And in our industry, that seems to be the making side. People love to do their growing. They love to go out in the vineyard and do the pruning and nurture and produce a good crop. But then they want to hand it over to somebody who's got all of the equipment, has made all of the investment to make the best possible product out of that season. And then they're very proud of that product, and they're very good at selling it. So that's the business model that really works for us on that side. That helps us to spread our overheads in the winery, and it helps us to justify having the best possible equipment in order to put the best wines into bottle. So I don't know if I've talked for 20 minutes. I feel like I've talked. I can't see many of you. You've been you're muted and shy, so I don't know whether you're still awake or not. I haven't left a gap at all for anybody to have a word, but it's probably a good time just to make sure that I'm going down the right route. Maybe you'd like to have a few questions or make a few comments.